On the morning of my wedding, I picked up my fiancé's phone to check the weather. But what I saw instead was a message from my sister. Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you. My name is Madeline Grant, and in 6 hours, I was supposed to walk down the aisle and say yes to forever. They thought I was the calm one. The reasonable one. The one who would stay silent no matter what. But when I uncovered what they'd done, I rewrote everything. If you've ever wondered what happens when the quiet one finally speaks, stay with me. This story is for you. I woke up to the soft murmur of waves against glass and the muted hum of the city beyond our penthouse suite. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I turned my head and saw the wedding dress still zipped in its garment bag hanging perfectly against the walnut-paneled wall. Today was my wedding day. The room smelled faintly of white lilies and citrus-scented candles someone from the hotel staff had thoughtfully lit before dawn. Outside, the Portland skyline was just starting to stir. And there was Ethan standing barefoot on the balcony wearing only his pajama pants with his phone pressed to his ear. His free hand rested on the railing. His posture was tight, not relaxed like usual. I propped myself up on one elbow watching him through the sheer curtain. He wasn't speaking, just listening. When he finally ended the call, he didn't come back in right away. Instead, he stood there, shoulders hunched slightly forward, tapping something into his phone with rapid fingers. Then he slid the phone into his pocket, stretched like he'd just finished a workout, and stepped back into the room. "Morning," he said, flashing that practiced smile. His voice was light, too light. "Morning," I replied, my throat dry. He walked over, leaned down to kiss my forehead, and mumbled something about taking a shower. I watched him disappear into the bathroom, the sound of water following seconds later. And that's when it happened. His phone buzzed once on the dresser screen, lighting up with a single message. "Just breathe. You've got this." It was from Juliet. I froze. My heart didn't beat faster. It stopped altogether for a moment. That voice in my head whispered the name again like it didn't make sense. Juliet. My sister. I stared at the message. Nothing about it screamed inappropriate. Not at first glance. It could have meant anything. But that's the problem with vague encouragements. They only come when there's something at stake. And Juliet had no business encouraging my fiancé on the morning of our wedding. Especially not after the strange energy between them at the rehearsal dinner. The private glances. The way Juliet laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. How Ethan tensed when she hugged him goodbye. I had noticed. I had filed it away like I always did with things that didn't quite sit right. I stood up slowly, the plush carpet sinking under my bare feet as I walked to the dresser. Ethan's phone was unlocked by facial recognition, but that was no use with him in the shower. So I used the fingerprint I had registered months ago when we were traveling and needed quick access to our travel documents on his phone. The lock screen dissolved. What I found wasn't explosive. Not at first. There were no nudes, no declarations of love. But there was something more dangerous. Familiarity. A long thread of messages, most of them short, some of them deleted. The timeline went back weeks, maybe months. Her contact was saved under just the letter J. But the tone was unmistakably intimate. Inside jokes. Check-ins. Made it home. Thanks for the ride. You're right. I needed that. Promise not to let it get weird. And then the one that made my stomach turn. Sometimes I wish it wasn't her. I stared at that sentence so long it started to blur. No response. Just her words hanging there in the middle of the thread like an echo of a truth no one had dared say aloud. I kept scrolling, piecing together scraps of a story they hadn't meant for me to read. There were references to the day she came by the office. An out-of-town conference. One night when Ethan was unreachable for hours and told me his phone had died. Juliet's message that same night. I haven't laughed that hard in forever. I felt a strange clarity settle over me, the kind that arrives when something already broken finally reveals its shape. My hands weren't shaking, my face wasn't hot. I just started taking pictures of the screen. Every message, every timestamp, every tiny moment they hadn't deleted. My thumb moved fast, deliberate, cold. Then I placed the phone exactly where I had found it. Locked it. Walked back to the bed. Saturday. The water kept running. I could hear Ethan humming off key like nothing was wrong. Like everything was perfectly in place. I didn't say a word when he stepped out, towel around his waist, hair damp and messy in that way he knew I liked. He grinned and said something about the weather being perfect. I nodded. As he dressed, I stared at the garment bag. Ivory satin, hand-sewn lace. A custom piece I had dreamed of since I was 15. My mother's earrings sat in their velvet box on the nightstand. Juliet had helped pick them out. He leaned over again, kissed the top of my head, and whispered that he'd meet me downstairs in 30 minutes. Take your time, baby. Just breathe. I smiled. When the door shut behind him, I walked to the window and pressed my hand to the glass. Outside, the streets were bathed in gold, people going about their day unaware that something sacred was starting to unravel just above them. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was gathering. Not storming. Not accusing. Just noting. There would be time for storms later. Now was for collecting proof. And breathing. I turned from the window, opened my journal, and began writing. Not what I felt. What I saw. Because this wasn't about heartbreak, it was about preparation. And I had learned long ago that when betrayal starts with whispers, you answer with silence. But silence does not mean surrender. It means watching. And I was wide awake. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling as the sound of ocean waves echoed softly in the distance. The Maldives breeze drifted through the open balcony doors, but it wasn't the sea air that chilled me. It was the memory of everything I had tucked into a quiet corner of my mind for years. Juliet wasn't always the villain. She was once the little girl clutching my hand in the supermarket, the one who begged me to sleep in her room during thunderstorms, who cried if I left for school without hugging her goodbye. Back then, I believed protecting her was my job. That was the role I was given even before I was old enough to understand what roles meant. But things shifted slowly, like a tide pulling at the shoreline. I was 9 when I first noticed it. Juliet had broken Mom's favorite ceramic vase, playing dress-up with scarves. I took the blame without thinking, expecting nothing. Later that night, Mom stroked Juliet's hair and said she was fragile, too sweet to understand consequences. I was the strong one, the sensible one. The one who could take it. It became a pattern. Broken picture frames, ruined birthday dresses, spilled nail polish on Dad's work briefcase. I absorbed it all like a sponge. They told me I was mature for my age. That I didn't need as much attention. That Juliet was sensitive. That she needed more love, more patience. So I worked harder. At school, I brought home straight A's. I volunteered. I helped Juliet with her homework while she pouted and tossed her pencil across the table. I let it slide when she took credit for my science project in 8th grade. I even defended her when she skipped class and blamed a stomachache. By the time I was 16, I had a job at the local bookstore and was saving for college. Juliet. She was dating a senior who drove a red convertible and told our parents she wanted to be an actress. She floated through life with a kind of golden glow around her, like nothing could touch her. And when it did, I was there to cushion the fall. After college, I moved to Seattle for work. I bought my first condo at 25. It wasn't big, but it was mine. Juliet showed up the same year, wide-eyed and full of drama. She said she needed a fresh start. She'd broken up with some guy in Portland and her roommate had kicked her out. She had nowhere to go. I said yes without hesitation. She brought 3 oversized suitcases and a box of crystals, said she was going through a spiritual reset. She stayed for 8 months. At first it was fine. We had wine nights and watched old movies. I thought maybe this was the start of us being real sisters, not just the big little dynamic we'd carried since childhood. But the old patterns crept back like water through a cracked window. She borrowed my clothes without asking. I'd come home and find my favorite sweater crumpled in the laundry or my earrings on the bathroom counter. Once I saw her trying on a red cocktail dress I'd been planning to wear for a work gala. She smiled like it was nothing. Said she wanted to feel powerful for once. Then came the texts. I was seeing someone at the time. Ryan. He worked in tech and had a laugh that could shake a whole room. One night, he showed me a message Juliet had sent him. It wasn't flirtatious exactly, just off. She asked if he ever felt like I was emotionally distant. Said she could tell he needed someone who listened better. I didn't confront her then. I convinced myself it was just her way of seeking connection. That she didn't mean harm. That it was Juliet being Juliet. But I stopped inviting her into my space after that. The next few years I built my career. Moved into a larger place. Switched firms. I met Mark at a conference in San Francisco and we hit it off instantly. He was the kind of man who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. The kind who held doors open and read books without prompting. When I brought him home to meet the family, my mother called him charming. My father offered him scotch. Juliet cried. She said she was happy for me, of course she was, but something about her expression never quite matched her words. That night after dinner, she found me in the hallway and whispered she was afraid of losing me. Said if I got married, it wouldn't be just the two of us anymore. That our family had already changed too much. I hugged her, but something inside me pulled away. Later my parents said Juliet was just emotional. That she'd always been sensitive. That I should be patient. I was 32 when Mark proposed. We were in Whistler on a ski trip and he dropped to one knee in a flurry of snow. I said yes. We laughed, cried, made snow angels like kids. I called my parents that night. My mom cried. My dad congratulated me. Juliet didn't pick up. When she finally called me back a week later, her voice was tight. She said congratulations, but she was swamped with work. Said she hoped we wouldn't have some big wedding that made her feel like an outsider. That was the first time I let silence answer for me. When I bought the new house last year, she asked to stay again. Just for a month, she said. Just until she figured things out. I told her no. Kindly but firmly. I said she needed her own space now. That I couldn't carry her anymore. She hung up on me. And that's the thing. Every boundary I ever tried to draw she treated like an insult. Every no was a betrayal. So when they erased my name from the wedding invitations and said Juliet had more family-centered plans, I didn't scream, I didn't fight. Because deep down I already knew how this family worked. And I was done pretending I didn't. The first thing I noticed was the light. It poured in from the ceiling-high windows, golden and gentle, dancing across the marble floors of the penthouse suite. Outside, Lake Tahoe shimmered like a dream, calm and untouched. For a moment, I let myself believe this morning would be just as perfect. But then I turned over and saw that Ethan wasn't beside me. I pushed the silk sheets aside and sat up, wrapping the robe tighter around my waist. The clock on the nightstand read 6:32. Too early for nerves to settle, too late to go back to sleep. I heard the soft creak of the balcony door. Ethan stood outside, phone in hand, his back to me, dressed in nothing but his pajama pants. His shoulders were tense even from here. He wasn't just checking the weather or reading the news. I stayed quiet, watching him through the glass. He didn't pace, but his fingers moved quickly, typing, deleting, typing again. Then he paused, brought the phone to his chest like he was bracing himself, and looked out over the water. A moment later, he slid the phone into his pocket and came back inside. "Morning," he said, leaning over to kiss my forehead. His skin was warm, lips soft, but I could smell the trace of tension on him like cologne. "You slept okay?" he asked, already walking toward the bathroom. "Yeah," I nodded, slowly watching him disappear into the steam. I forced a small smile, but my stomach twisted. As soon as I heard the water running, I glanced toward the nightstand. His phone was there, screen face up. I told myself to ignore it. But then it lit up. "Just breathe. You've got this." It was from Juliet. For a split second, I stared, confused. Juliet. My younger sister. Maid of honor. The one who had posted dozens of curated photos of our bridal suite last night like it was her event, not mine. She had been distant lately. Odd almost. Backhanded compliments, little comments about Ethan. And Ethan. He'd told me they barely talked. So why was she texting him this early? And why did the message feel rehearsed? The water still ran in the background. Without thinking too hard, I picked up his phone and pressed my thumb to the home button. It opened. I froze. My heart thumped hard as I scrolled. At first, there were only a few messages. But then I noticed several had been deleted. Whole gaps in the timeline. Still some pieces remained. From 3 nights ago, Juliet, should we cancel the tasting or still act normal? Ethan, we keep going. No one knows anything. Juliet. Okay, just don't flinch. I'll handle her. My mouth went dry. From a week before, Ethan, what if she finds out? Juliet, then she'll do what she always does. Fold. Ethan, I don't want her hurt. Juliet, then don't fall apart. Be smart. I sat there for a long time, barely breathing. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scrolled further back. 2 weeks. A month. Bits and pieces, deleted threads, photos I couldn't retrieve. Voice notes I couldn't play. But enough remained. Enough to tell me something had been going on, and not just yesterday. Not just a text or two. Weeks. Maybe longer. I didn't cry, I didn't gasp. I didn't throw the phone. I just set it back on the nightstand screen down this time and stood up. My hands trembled slightly as I walked over to the window. The lake still looked the same. Serene. Unmoved. The shower stopped. I grabbed my phone and opened the Notes app. Without a word, I began typing. Everything I remembered. Every fragment of text I could recall. Names. Phrases. Timestamps. My memory worked better when I moved, so I paced slowly across the suite as I typed. No punctuation. Just raw data. I had always believed that if something was off, I would feel it in my bones. I guess I had. But I had called it nerves. Bridal jitters. Stress. But this wasn't stress. This was betrayal, and it had been hiding in plain sight. When Ethan stepped out of the bathroom, towel draped over his shoulders, he smiled. You okay? He asked, his voice soft. I looked up and nodded. Yeah, just wedding day butterflies, I said. He reached for me and I let him kiss my cheek. His skin was warm, his arms familiar. But I didn't lean into him the way I usually did. I didn't rest my head on his chest. I couldn't. Instead, I smiled and asked if he wanted coffee. He said yes. And just like that, we went through the morning routine. Hair. Makeup. Breakfast with the bridal party. Laughter that felt slightly too sharp. Juliet breezing in with her gown draped over her arm, kissing my cheek like nothing had changed. Maybe for her nothing had. Maybe for her this was all just another scene in a show she had scripted from the start. But I didn't let it show. I kept my posture steady, my smile soft, my tone light. Because today wasn't just a wedding day anymore, it was also the beginning of something else. Something careful, something quiet. And if they thought I would fold like I always did, they were in for a surprise. I stayed up the entire night. The Maldives sunrise bled through the gauzy curtains, soft and orange like sherbet, but I barely noticed. My laptop glowed in the dark room, a single cursor blinking beside a folder labeled Seattle Archives. I had almost forgotten about the old security system I'd installed back in my condo when I first moved to Seattle. It wasn't cloud-based. It ran on a local drive tucked away in the back of the linen closet behind old tax documents and a broken humidifier. When we were packing for the trip, I'd grabbed the drive without even thinking, just in case I needed a piece of home. Turns out what I brought was something else entirely. I plugged it in, fingers trembling, heart steadying itself for confirmation of a feeling I hadn't dared name. I opened the footage from the week before Juliet's engagement announcement. The day she stopped by my condo alone, uninvited. At first it looked innocent. She entered through the front door with that airy confidence of someone who believed nothing she did could ever catch up to her. She strolled around, touching books, flipping through my mail. Then she stood still, turned toward the hallway closet, and walked straight to the wall safe I'd hidden behind a photo of our parents at Yosemite. I paused the video. No hesitation, no searching. She knew exactly where the safe was. I clicked play again. She punched in the code. My birth date. She opened the door, pulled out the manila envelope. I leaned in closer. It was the exact envelope I had locked away months ago. Inside it, the notarized copy of my grandmother's original will. The one leaving me the villa, the trust, the stocks, everything. My stomach turned. Juliet didn't just glance at it. She unfolded the document, read through it, and smiled like someone who had found a key to the kingdom. Then she pulled out her phone. Not a voice call. A video call. The screen reflected her face, then flickered into the familiar profile of a man I hadn't seen since the night he told me he needed time to think. Ethan. The same Ethan who had held me when I cried. Who had helped me draft a response to the estate attorneys. Who had kissed me on the balcony and said he wanted to build a life with me. His face lit up when he saw her. I turned the volume up. Juliet's voice was clear as a bell. I kept my finger near the pause button in case I needed to stop and scream. She whispered. She won't fight it. She never does. Ethan laughed softly. By the time she finds out you'll be in Milan with the funds. My entire body went cold. Like blood had stopped moving. Like the air in the room had thickened and I was suffocating on betrayal. They planned this. They had planned this before the engagement announcement. Before the dinner party. Before I ever boarded the plane. They knew I would freeze. That I would play nice. That I would hand over my inheritance and my silence like I always had. But they made one mistake. They recorded it. I watched the rest of the footage. Juliet casually refolded the will, placed it back, but not before snapping a photo with her phone. She closed the safe, blew a kiss to the screen, and ended the call. I sat back shaking. I didn't know what hurt more. That my sister had violated my home, my trust, and my grandmother's final wishes. Or that the man I almost believed I would marry had watched it happen without blinking. I saved the clip under a new folder, use when ready. Mark stirred beside me. He hadn't asked questions when I pulled the hard drive from the suitcase. He simply kissed my shoulder and whispered, "I trust you." I didn't wake him. Instead, I walked out to the deck. The ocean below sparkled with early light. The horizon felt like a different world. I dialed Caleb. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. "Did someone die? Number not yet." "Well, good morning to you too. I found something. You need to see it." I walked him through what I saw. The footage. The conversation. The will. I emailed the file as we spoke. "You're sure that's your condo, that's your safe?" "It's mine. Every inch of it." "And the will?" "Still there. I checked after she left that day. I never thought she'd copy it. I never thought Ethan." My voice caught. He was silent a moment. "Okay, here's what we do. Don't confront them. Not yet. I'll have a forensic tech authenticate the footage. If it holds up, we'll submit it to probate and the court handling the trust. But we don't show our cards until I say go." "How long?" 2 days. 3 tops." I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me. "Caleb." "Yeah, thank you." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then you're not alone, Madeline." "Not this time." I ended the call, hands buzzing. I looked out at the sea again. The waves were calm. But underneath, the current had shifted. And so had I. I leaned into the role like it was tailored just for me. The next morning, I offered Juliet a fresh cup of oat milk latte before she even asked. She looked surprised, then smug, as if I was finally stepping into my designated spot, the agreeable sister, the silent one. I smiled sweetly, let her talk, nodded at the right times. When she mentioned how she wanted white orchids flown in from Maui for the rehearsal dinner centerpieces, I gasped like it was the most luxurious idea I'd ever heard. Inside, I was memorizing every detail. The boutique appointment that afternoon felt surreal. I stood next to her as she tried on a beaded ivory gown with a plunging back and murmured how perfect it looked. The sales consultant, a woman named Brenna, with a tight bun and tighter smile, gushed over Juliet like she was royalty. I stayed quiet, letting Juliet soak it up. While she twirled in front of the mirror, I slipped into the changing room under the pretense of checking my phone. I wasn't checking anything. I was uploading the last set of scanned documents into a secure folder and sending them to Harold's encrypted email. Scans of the original trust Margaret had drafted. Margaret's own signature. The notarized authorization granting me full rights to disclose the real will. Everything. Harold replied within 10 minutes. Got it. Attached is the clean copy of Margaret's signed authorization. You can release at your discretion. Stay alert. I locked my phone and rejoined Juliet just as she asked if she looked like Grace Kelly. I told her she looked better. That was all she needed to hear. Back at the hotel, I excused myself early under the guise of a migraine. In reality, I was on a video call with my new lawyer Anna Reyes, a sharp, understated woman who had once gone head-to-head with oil conglomerates and won. I chose her not just because she was good but because she was outside the Prescott and Whitaker orbits. No ties to Portland, no favors owed. Anna took one look at the files I sent her and said calmly, "If this goes public, your sister's claim to the estate collapses in 24 hours. The forgery alone is enough for a full-blown investigation. Do you want this released before or after the ceremony?" I didn't answer right away. I was looking at the framed picture on the nightstand. A photo Juliet had insisted we take 2 nights ago, all smiles, matching robes, champagne flutes in hand. She had uploaded it to Instagram with the caption, "Nothing like sisterhood." The next morning, we went cake tasting. I let her complain about the buttercream frosting being too sweet, the fondant too stiff. I tasted each option with the enthusiasm of someone who had nothing better to do. When she chose the guava passionfruit combo, I nodded and said it was the right call. Ethan watched me carefully through the tasting, sipping his espresso, his brow slightly furrowed. Later, while Juliet argued with the florist on speakerphone, he walked up behind me on the hotel terrace and said quietly, "You're too calm." I glanced at the rose garden below. "Maybe I'm finally growing up." He didn't laugh. "Or maybe you're planning something." I turned to him and smiled. "I'm planning to make it through this weekend without any drama. That's all." He searched my face for a long second but said nothing more. He knew. Not everything but enough to know something had shifted. By Saturday, the night of the rehearsal dinner, I had perfected the act. I wore the lavender dress Juliet picked for me, let the stylist curl my hair into soft waves, and let myself be led into the rooftop lounge like a docile bridesmaid. The lights twinkled over the city skyline and guests clinked glasses while Juliet gave a speech thanking everyone who believed in her. She even thanked me. To my sister Madeline, who's been my rock, my ride or die, and the calm to my chaos. I don't know how I would have survived without her these past few months. Everyone applauded. I smiled. Tilted my glass. Later, while she posed for photos, I slipped away and called Anna from the hallway behind the banquet room. "Release it," I said. Monday morning. 8 a.m. Pacific time, the morning after the wedding. Anna didn't ask why not sooner, she just said, "You're sure?" I was. I returned to the party and let Juliet pull me into more pictures. Ethan stood beside her with his hand resting gently on her waist, but his eyes found mine more than once. Juliet didn't notice. She was too busy basking in being the center of the universe. By midnight, I helped her into the bridal suite, unzipping her dress like a dutiful sister. She flopped onto the couch, wine-drowsy, and mumbled, "This is going to be the best day of my life." I tucked a blanket around her, whispered goodnight, and walked out into the hallway without looking back. Outside the hotel, the rain had started, soft, steady, like something being washed away. I stood beneath the awning and let the wind play with my hair. Juliet thought she had won. My parents believed she deserved it all. But they had all overlooked one simple thing. I had stopped begging to be seen. And I had started writing the ending myself. I woke up just after 6, the sky outside still painted in soft streaks of lavender and blue. For a moment the silence felt almost sacred. But then, I remembered where I was, what day it was, and what had to be done before noon. My heart beat calmly, not with panic, but with something clearer. Purpose. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and stared at my phone. No new messages, no missed calls. Not from my parents, not from Juliet, and certainly not from Ethan. Perfect. The first call I made was to the bank. I had already spoken with Harold a few days prior, setting the legal groundwork in motion. But now it was time to act. The voice on the other end of the line confirmed the account access with a brief pause. "Yes, ma'am, I see here the joint wedding fund account. Is this in regard to the withdrawal you scheduled?" I took a breath. "Number. I'd like to cancel that transfer. And I'd like to freeze the joint access. Immediately." "Of course. We'll need verification from your end through the app, but that's doable." Within minutes, the $75,000 Ethan and I had saved plus the additional deposits I had made from my personal savings were no longer within reach of anyone but me. The funds were rerouted into a trust account under Harold's supervision. Everything was clean, legal, and entirely mine again. Next, I canceled the honeymoon suite at the Four Seasons Bora Bora. I hadn't agreed to that booking. Ethan had made it himself using my name, assuming I'd follow him into the sunset without a second thought. But that reservation was gone now. Let him explain it to the concierge. I typed a message to him without overthinking it. Meet me at the venue at noon. Then I left the hotel. I didn't pack much. Just a tote with my essentials, my ID, the folder Harold had prepared for me, and the diamond studs Grandma Lillian had given me for my college graduation. I left the rest, including the bridesmaid's robe they'd hung on the door. Juliet's monogrammed initials were stitched across the back in pale gold thread. I almost laughed. I slipped out through the side entrance, past the lobby where a few early risers were grabbing coffee, and hailed a cab instead of calling a rideshare. I didn't want anything traceable. Where to, ma'am? Downtown Portland. But take the scenic route. The driver didn't ask questions. We passed the Willamette River as the sun began rising over the east side, golden light bouncing off the water like it was alive. For the first time in days, I let my shoulders drop and inhaled deeply. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. The cab dropped me off 2 blocks from Harold's office. His building was still quiet when I buzzed the intercom. He answered in his usual clipped tone, then opened the door for me himself. "Early bird catches the worm," he said, giving me a once-over. "You look like you haven't slept." I didn't come here to sleep. I handed him the paperwork I had signed the night before and watched him scan through it. "You're sure?" I nodded. "Then we proceed." He reached into his drawer and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a certified copy of Grandma Lillian's revised will. It hadn't been filed until now, but it was notarized, legal, and devastatingly clear. "I want you to keep that copy with you," he said. "The originals are with me, sealed and time-stamped. But I suspect you'll want this in your hand today." I stared at the embossed seal on the bottom corner. My name, and only my name, listed under the inheritance line. Not Juliet's. Not a cent to my parents. Just me, and the clause stating that if anyone attempted to interfere, the estate would default to the community foundation Grandma had supported for years. That was Grandma in a nutshell. Love with a lock on it. By the time I left his office, it was nearing 10. I stopped at a corner cafe for a black coffee and sat by the window watching strangers walk by with no idea what was coming down on the Whitaker name in a matter of hours. I thought about what Juliet was doing at that moment. Probably getting her makeup done, surrounded by our cousins laughing, maybe sipping champagne from the bridal suite. I could almost hear her voice echoing in fake modesty. "I'm just so lucky. It's all going to be perfect." I hoped she was enjoying it, because it would be the last time she'd be able to bask in that kind of spotlight without seeing the shadows behind it. At 11:45, I left the cafe and walked the remaining blocks to the venue. It was a restored vineyard estate tucked just outside the city limits. I'd loved it the first time I visited. Juliet had stolen the booking 2 days after I told her about it, parading it as if she discovered it herself. But today I arrived not as a guest or forgotten sister. I arrived as the one person they hadn't prepared for. The planner greeted me near the back gardens, clearly flustered. "Are you at the bridal party?" "No," I said gently. "I'm meeting the groom." She hesitated but didn't stop me. Ethan was already near the altar pacing. When he saw me, he smiled nervously. "Hey. I thought you were getting ready with the girls." I held up the envelope in my hand. "There's something you need to see before the ceremony." His smile faded. "What is that?" "I'll explain. But not here. Not with them watching." He looked toward the main house where my parents were mingling with guests. "Camille, what's going on?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Everything you think you know about this wedding, about my family, about Juliet, is about to change." Ethan blinked. "And you're telling me this now?" I handed him the envelope and watched him read the top line. His eyes widened, his lips parted. And then silence. "Meet me by the fountain in 10 minutes," I said. And I walked away before he could ask a single question. The driver was already waiting at the curb when I stepped out of the hotel. He didn't speak, just opened the door and nodded. The Manhattan sky still held the weight of the storm from earlier, but I barely noticed. My suitcase bumped softly behind me as I slid into the back seat and closed the door. We didn't head north toward the Hudson where the wedding would be. Instead, we merged onto the freeway toward JFK. I sat still, my hands folded over the envelope on my lap, the seal still warm from my thumb. Inside were the final documents Harold had prepared, including the clause that would unravel everything Juliet and my parents thought they secured. The flight wasn't commercial. Mark had arranged a charter out of the private terminal. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since Juliet hijacked our pitch in Palo Alto and repackaged it for that faux sustainability project she launched 3 months later. She made millions from it. Mark got threats of litigation. I got silence. Until last week. It was nearly midnight when I received his email. One sentence. Tell me when and where. I owe you more than words. Now, as I stepped into the small cabin of the jet, I found him already there, legs crossed, flipping through a worn leather notebook like he was trying not to look too relieved. You look different, he said after a moment. You look exactly the same, I replied, and then I sat across from him and let the engine drown out the rest. The Maldives were blue in every direction. By the time we landed and took the seaplane to the island, the sun had already dipped low behind the water, casting long shadows over the thatched rooftops of the villas. My suite was on the eastern edge, hidden among palm trees and surrounded by silence. When I pushed open the glass doors, I could see the ocean from the bed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the balcony with my laptop composing 2 final emails. The first was to Harold. Attached were the updated financials, proof of asset transfers, and the video from the security camera Juliet forgot existed in the estate library the night she forged Margaret's initials. I thanked him for his loyalty, for never flinching when my name disappeared from the family tree, and hit send. The second was to Ethan. Subject for your records. Inside, I pasted Harold's letter in full. Miss Grant has exercised her right under Clause C of Margaret Whittaker's trust. All transfers, appointments, and proxy authorities granted to Miss Juliet Whittaker are now null. Effective immediately. I added no explanation. No emotion. Just forwarded the message and attached the notarized version along with a single sentence typed below. If you're looking for your bride, she's probably busy rehearsing her press speech. The next morning, Mark knocked gently on the sliding door holding 2 coffees and a newspaper rolled under his arm. You sent it, he said, handing me a mug. I nodded. She has no idea yet. They're probably still hungover from the rehearsal dinner. She's throwing a post-wedding press event tomorrow right in New York. Studio rental, 6-figure lighting crew, a champagne wall, and digital backdrops featuring our grandmother's name on every quote. Mark exhaled through his teeth. She's going to detonate. Let her. Later that day, I walked barefoot across the white sand and sat under a canopy facing the water. My phone buzzed once. A New York number. Then again. Ethan. Then Mom. Then Juliet. I powered it off and tossed it under a towel. That night, Mark brought out a bottle of wine from a boutique Napa label we both used to love. We sat by the infinity pool, feet dangling in the water, and didn't talk much. Do you think they'll fight it? He asked eventually. They'll try, I said. But Grandma wrote Clause C with eyes wide open. Juliet can't prove duress. And if they challenge it publicly, the letters Juliet wrote to the board back in January will come out. The ones she thought were destroyed. They'll have to explain why the grant committee chair suddenly stepped down, why the trademarks were quietly transferred to Ethan's shell company, and why a project supposedly founded on transparency has 5 NDAs attached to its core IP. Mark gave a low whistle. They really thought you'd disappear forever. They did. And they still do. The next day, as the world in New York prepared to meet the newly minted Mrs. Ethan Langston, I floated in the Indian Ocean and watched the sky turn from soft coral to lavender. The resort staff brought lunch to the edge of the cabana and smiled as they asked if I needed anything else. Just peace. I replied, and they nodded like they understood exactly. Somewhere across the world, Juliet stood on a stage she built with borrowed bricks. But the foundation was mine, and the deed had just been pulled out from under her feet. I didn't need to see it live. I didn't need her reaction or my mother's. The silence between their calls was enough. They knew. And for once they were the ones scrambling, not me. That night, I walked the shoreline alone, each wave swallowing the footprints behind me. And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The flight to the Maldives had been quiet. Mark and I barely spoke, but it wasn't out of tension. It was focus. Precision. We had everything we needed. The will. The security footage. The voice recording. And the final gift from Harold, a timed email programmed to send the moment Juliet took the stage at her grand event. We arrived just as the sky began to melt into soft pinks and golds. Our overwater villa was more sanctuary than shelter. I slipped off my shoes and walked straight onto the balcony, letting the warm breeze roll over me. It smelled like sea salt and hibiscus. Mark stood beside me, silent, his hand brushing mine. That night we didn't celebrate. Not yet. We just sat on the deck, toes skimming the turquoise water, waiting. I barely slept. At dawn I opened my laptop and checked the status. Email sent. Timestamp 6:47 p.m. EST. That was precisely 12 minutes before Juliet's presentation began. She'd booked out an entire rooftop garden space in Midtown Manhattan for the launch of her new fashion line. Investors, press, bloggers, influencers. All of them gathered under strings of crystal lights and white floral arches to witness her shining moment. She named the line the Margaret Collection. An insult so obvious I didn't know whether to laugh or weep. She'd taken our grandmother's name and twisted it into branding. Juliet walked onto the stage in a white pantsuit, confident as ever. She smiled, arms outstretched, ready to bask in the applause. But as she turned to cue the screen behind her, the lights dimmed. The first image was not a promotional video. It was the interior of our grandmother's study. From a fixed angle, the footage showed Juliet slipping into the room after hours, entering the 6-digit code to the safe, pulling out a folder and flipping through its contents. Then she took out her phone. Another split screen appeared, this time showing her call log. Ethan Moore. 4 calls. All within the hour. Then came the audio. It was faint at first, then clear. Juliet's voice. I got it. She doesn't know anything. It's signed. If we get this done before the end of the quarter, the shares are ours. Then Ethan and Madeline, a beat. Then Juliet's low laugh. She's halfway across the country and broke. Who's going to believe her now? Gasps echoed through the venue. You could hear chairs scrape the floor. A phone clattered to the ground. Then the screen cut again. This time it was my grandmother. A video we recorded just 3 months before she died. She sat on the same balcony we used to play on as kids, the ocean humming behind her. Her voice fragile but unwavering. My granddaughter Madeline has my full trust. I've seen the way she honors this family. She's the one who deserves everything I've built. If this message is playing, it means someone tried to erase her. But I won't let them. The screen went black. Juliet stood frozen. Her hand flew to her chest, then dropped to her side. She looked around like a woman stranded. People didn't look back at her. They stared through her. Ethan was among the guests, seated 2 rows from the front. His jaw tightened. I imagined his lawyer brain working overtime. Risk. Exposure. Damage control. He stood up and walked away without a word. I heard later that the next day he terminated the joint venture deal they had signed just weeks earlier. Claimed material misrepresentation. He didn't even return her calls. As for the investors, they pulled out within hours. Some demanded refunds. Others went public with their outrage. Her brand stock tanked. By midnight, hashtags were trending: number justice for Margaret and number the other Whitaker. I didn't post anything. Except one email sent to the press. I didn't destroy them. I just let the truth speak. No signature. No explanation. Just that. Mark and I sat in our villa that night, the breeze cooler now. He read every headline out loud while I floated in the infinity pool staring at the stars. I asked him once, why do people lie like that so boldly? As if they'll never be caught. He looked at me not with bitterness but quiet understanding. Because the truth is patient, Maddie. It waits. I closed my eyes and let myself drift just for a moment, weightless. Somewhere across the world my sister's empire was unraveling. And I didn't feel a thing. The first time I saw the headline, I was eating pineapples straight from the rind under a palm tree on Mafushi Island. A group of surfers nearby had just wiped out in unison and were laughing their way back to shore. The sun was too bright to read clearly, but the bold text was unmistakable: Juliet Grant accused in trust fund scandal. I tilted the screen of my tablet to get a better view. The article was thorough, aggressive. It quoted 3 sources from financial regulatory agencies and included screenshots from the leaked bank transfers, one of which was the infamous accidental redirect of $250,000 from the estate trust to Juliet's personal account at Sterling Pacific Bank. That transfer, made 6 months before Grandma Lillian passed, had a note attached: temporary reallocation board approved, except no such board ever existed. Scrolling further, there was a blurry still from the engagement party: Juliet beaming, Ethan toasting, and me standing at the edge of the frame with a glass of sparkling water watching them both. The comments were relentless. Trust fund thief. Corporate brat. Backdoor Barbie. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was distance. Like the whole thing belonged to someone else's life. The girl in the photo wasn't me anymore. Later that afternoon, while rinsing sand off my feet, I saw a video trending on multiple platforms. Ethan. Sitting across from a news anchor, all jaw tension and faux remorse. She asked him directly if he had known about the transfers. He blinked. Then, in a voice so carefully measured it almost sounded rehearsed, he said he'd been misled. That Juliet had hidden the truth from him. That he was devastated. But 20 seconds later, the video cut to another clip, one where he and Juliet were laughing in the bridal boutique, pointing at a spreadsheet on an iPad. A zoom-in showed the tab at the top: fund projection revised. The video ended with a freeze frame and 3 words superimposed in white font. He knew everything. I turned off my screen. That night, the sky over the Indian Ocean was so clear I could count constellations I hadn't seen since I was a child. Orion. Cassiopeia. Even the Big Dipper, low and faint near the horizon. I lay on a hammock, swaying gently, trying to remember the last time I had fallen asleep without some version of anger clinging to my chest. A week into my stay, I signed up for beginner surf lessons. My instructor was a woman in her 50s with sun-bleached hair and a raspy laugh who said things like, "Lean into the wave, not away from it." She had no idea who I was. Nobody on the island did. I was just another tired American trying to lose herself in warm water and motion. And that was enough. Midweek, I got an email. The subject line was short: an invitation. It was from a Professor Daria Levinson at MIT's Media Lab. She said she'd followed the public developments with interest and believed my perspective as a former tech founder, whistleblower, and survivor of corporate betrayal could offer rare insight to her graduate seminar. The title made me laugh: Ethics and Betrayal in Tech Culture. I let the email sit in my inbox for 2 days before replying. I told her I'd think about it. One evening, while watching the sunset melt into the ocean, I got a text from Caleb. No pleasantries. Just a link to a legal brief. The Grant family assets were now under forensic review. Juliet's accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Ethan had been served a subpoena. I read every line in silence. Then I deleted the message and stared at the sky until it went dark. The next morning, I went out early, long before the other tourists were awake. I paddled out past the break just beyond where the waves crashed. The water was calm there, gently rising and falling beneath my board like it was breathing. I lay on my stomach, closed my eyes, and let the ocean carry me. I thought about how many years I had spent proving I was worthy. Of love. Of recognition. Of space at the table. How many silent dinners I had endured. How many times I had offered help only to be told I was too much or not enough or in the way. And now they were being investigated. Now they were being seen for what they were. But I didn't want to build my future out of rubble and revenge. I wanted something else. Something lighter, something mine. When I paddled back to shore, I felt strong. Not triumphant, just steady. That afternoon, I sat on the porch of the bungalow, a journal open in my lap. I began to write, not a business plan, not a strategy, not even a rebuttal. I wrote about the first time I built a circuit board with my dad in the garage. About the time Juliet and I fought over who got to ride in the front seat on the way to Grandma's. About the wedding fund I had saved since my early 20s and how it had vanished with a forged signature. And then I wrote about silence. The kind that doesn't mean weakness but restraint. The kind that lets truth echo louder than any scream. As the sun dipped behind the palms, I kept writing, letting the words bleed out of me. Not to prove a point. Not to punish anyone. But to remember who I was before they tried to write me out. A knock came at the door. The bungalow manager holding a small envelope with a wax seal I recognized immediately. It was from Harold. I took it heart quiet but aware. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I walked barefoot across the warm sand, envelope in hand, down to the waterline where the sky and sea blurred. I stood there breathing, letting the world catch up to me. The phone rang again. I didn't need to check the screen to know it was them. I sat on the edge of the balcony in our rented villa, the Maldivian breeze pulling at the hem of my linen shirt, the ocean murmuring below like it knew everything and chose to keep quiet. Eventually, I picked up the phone and let it ring out. The voicemail icon blinked like a warning light. Then another one. And another. By the time I opened the voice inbox, there were 3 messages. All from Portland. All from the house I no longer called home. The first was Douglas. His voice cracked before he could say anything coherent, then he tried again. Maddie? Sweetheart. We didn't know. If we had known the kind of man Ethan was, if we'd seen how far things had gone. I swear to you, your mother and I never meant for you to get hurt. We were blind. We were stupid. I was stupid. He stopped. I heard the shudder of breath like he was crying, or trying not to. Then Lorraine's voice came in, soft, shaken, completely unlike the woman who once accused me of being cold at Thanksgiving. We're sorry, Madeline. Truly. If we could take it back, we would. All of it. The way we talked to you. The way we made you feel invisible. Juliet told us what happened. About the ring. About the villa. About everything. Then a pause. He's not worth it. Ethan. We see that now. And we miss you. Please. Just call us back. I deleted the message. The second one was Juliet. She didn't call. She sent a voice note. At first, I didn't want to open it. But something in me wanted to hear her voice. Not for closure, not for reconciliation. Just to confirm it sounded the same. That she was still her. That I hadn't imagined the whole thing. Hey. I know you won't answer. I don't blame you. She paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. A car door slamming. Maybe she was walking. Maybe she was pacing. I just wanted to say, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I didn't plan to fall in love with him. I didn't even know I had until it was too late. I know that doesn't make it right, but I needed to tell you. I needed you to know that I never wanted to take anything from you. I just wanted someone to see me. To choose me. And he did. Another breath. This one unsteady. And I know you probably hate me. Maybe I deserve that. But I never stopped loving you as my sister. Not for a second. I listened to it twice. Not because I needed to hear her confession again, but because I was waiting for something that never came. A real apology. Not an explanation wrapped in self-pity. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I didn't write back and list the betrayals in bullet points. Instead, I opened my voice memos and found the one I'd saved months ago. The last conversation I'd had with Margaret before she passed. Her voice was strong even in its weariness. Juliet was always loved. But Madeline was never seen. And no one can live unseen forever, sweetheart. Even shadows find light. I forwarded the audio to Juliet. No message attached, no signature, no commentary. She could listen to it or not. Understand it or not. It wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Later that evening, I sat with Mark at the edge of the pool. He handed me a glass of wine and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His silence was the kind that held space, not judgment. "You okay?" he asked quietly after a while. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I kept thinking I'd feel something bigger. Anger. Relief. Vindication. But all I felt was this strange weightlessness. Like the thread tying me to that old life had finally snapped, and instead of falling, I'd floated. Mark reached for my hand and laced his fingers through mine. "They'll try again, you know. Call. Right. Maybe even show up." "I know." And I turned to look at him. The sky above us was freckled with stars, and somewhere beyond the horizon tomorrow was already beginning. "Let them." He smiled, squeezed my hand, and leaned back. A few hours later, I checked my inbox one last time. Juliet had replied. I listened to it alone. "I get it. I really do. You don't owe me anything. You never did. I just wanted to say thank you for the voice message. Grandma always knew. I think part of me always knew too." There was a pause, then a softer voice. "If you ever decide to talk again, I'll be here. But if not, I understand." That was it. No more calls after that, no more apologies, just silence. And for the first time in years, it wasn't suffocating. It was peace. I sat on the edge of the balcony as the sun dipped lower behind the palm trees, the last gold light spilling across the sea like a final blessing. My laptop rested on the wicker table beside me, cursor blinking in the empty email draft. The salt air curled through my hair, warm and heavy, as if it too carried memory. I had started this message a dozen times before, deleted it each time. But now the stillness in me was real. Not numbness, just calm. Not bitterness, just clarity. I typed slowly. "To those who once erased me from photos, family plans, and future trust, I forgive you. But I'm done." I paused, let the words sit on the screen. They were quiet, not sharp. I didn't want to slice anyone open. That wasn't the point anymore. The point was to let go while holding the truth steady. I reached to the folder beside me. Inside were the attachments I had gathered across the months, quietly, patiently. One by one, I uploaded them. The real will signed in my grandmother's unmistakable cursive, notarized, stamped, legally sound. The emails between Juliet and Ethan revealing not just their affair but their intent. I remembered the moment I first opened them, my stomach curling like a tight fist, then unfurling into something harder. Not pain. Decision. Then came the camera footage. Harold had obtained it with help from a private contact. Footage of Juliet slipping into my room at the Fairmont, finding the folder and scanning it. Her fingers shaking. The moment she realized, I knew. I included Harold's letter next. His signature neat and confident beneath the official letterhead explaining the legal confirmation of the will, the proof of forgery, in Juliet's version, and the timeline that showed everything had been transferred under deceit. Finally, the photos. My favorite ones. The villa in the Maldives, white curtains drifting in the breeze, the ocean calm and open behind me. A table set for one. The arch draped with orchids. My dress simple and flowing, nothing borrowed, nothing blue. Just me. Whole. Enough. I looked at the images and smiled. I hadn't married Ethan. That ceremony never happened. He was a lesson, not a destination. Beneath the attachments, I typed one final line. I didn't marry Ethan, I married freedom. The ring fits better this way. I read the email over once more. No anger, no demands, just facts and closure. I hit send. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and leaned back. The sounds of the island rose up around me. Distant music waves brushing the sand, laughter from a couple walking along the shore, but none of it intruded. I felt untouched by it all, and somehow more alive within it. My phone buzzed beside me. 1, 2, 3 times. First, a call from Juliet. I didn't answer. Then from Mom. Then Dad. Then silence. Then an email notification. Lorraine Prescott replied. I didn't open it. I stood up, stretched my arms to the sky, and let my bare feet touch the cool tile. I walked down the stairs to the garden where I'd planted frangipani trees earlier that week. They were blooming now. Tiny white fragrant stars. There had been a time I would have run to pick up those calls to chase after a seat at a table that was never truly mine. But that version of me was gone. Quietly, finally, I stepped into the garden, bent to touch one of the blossoms, then stood again. Behind me the villa lights flickered on. Inside, a fresh dinner waited. A glass of wine. A new book. A night with no performance, no pretense, no proof to offer anyone. The old me had been buried beneath years of expectation, obligation, manipulation, dressed as family ties. But here in this solitude of my own choosing I had chosen me. And I would choose her again tomorrow. The emails were now theirs to open. The truth theirs to reckon with. What they did next wasn't my burden to carry anymore. The wind rustled the palm leaves overhead, and I looked up at the stars beginning to pierce the velvet sky. It wasn't revenge I had sent, it was clarity. And they had never been ready for that. The villa was quiet that morning save for the rhythmic crash of waves and the distant hum of a fishing boat tracing the horizon. I sat on the terrace with a cup of black coffee in one hand and my laptop open in front of me. No notifications, no missed calls. Just stillness. I had postponed this long enough. I opened a new email draft and stared at the blinking cursor. My fingers hovered above the keys, uncertain at first. Then slowly I typed the words I knew would mark the end of it all. To those who once erased me from photos, family plans, and future trust, I forgive you. But I'm done. I didn't bother with salutations. No dear mom. No dear dad. Certainly not dear Juliet. Just the plain truth, as clean as salt air and as final as a closed door. I attached the scanned copy of the real Will Elaine Whitaker's original unedited version, complete with her signature notarized and dated 3 months before the one Juliet had presented at her engagement party. The document clearly stated the villa, the trust fund, and her personal holdings were to be divided equally between her 2 granddaughters, with a stipulation that any attempt to forge or alter her intent would result in forfeiture of all inheritance rights. Then came the email thread. A full record of messages between Ethan and Juliet dating back nearly 6 months. The tone of it shifted over time from friendly check-ins to planning, then to something far uglier. A message from Juliet 3 days before the engagement read, "I'll handle the prenup. She won't even think to ask for one." Another from Ethan replied, "As long as we flip the accounts before the wedding, there's no trail." There was of course a trail. I included a short video file, a quiet grainy clip from the security camera Ethan never noticed I had installed in my old apartment. In it he stood at my desk one afternoon thumbing through my safe documents. A timestamp glowed in the corner. 3 weeks before his proposal. My name never crossed his lips, but his intent was written all over his hands. Then came Harold's letter. He had written it by hand and mailed a scanned copy after we met in Portland. His legal commentary was measured, clinical, but the last paragraph wasn't. He'd written, "Camille, your grandmother saw more in you than they ever did. She chose you because you were the one who never asked for anything. She knew you'd protect what mattered most." I added one more photo. Just one. It showed me on the deck of the villa in the Maldives, barefoot, standing in a simple white dress, a single white orchid in my hair. No bouquet. No bridesmaids. Just me in the ocean and a ring that I had slipped onto my own finger. I'd asked Mark to take the photo. He had stepped back after and said nothing, only nodded. I didn't marry Ethan, I married freedom. The ring fits better this way. That was the last line. I stared at it for a while. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I just felt light. As if something long rotting inside of me had finally been released. I clicked send. And that was that. Later that day I heard Mark's footsteps behind me on the sand. He joined me under the shade of a swaying palm holding 2 cold coconuts freshly cracked open by the local fruit seller. "All done?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "They have everything now." He nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll respond?" I shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. But the point isn't what they do next. It's that I don't have to react to it anymore." There was a long pause. Then he said, You know, I never thought I'd see someone wear peace like it was made for them. But you do. I smiled and sipped the cold coconut water. It was sweet, fresh, unpretentious. Everything my former life wasn't. That night, I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I didn't want to be reachable. I lay in bed with the sliding doors open to the ocean breeze. The sheer white curtain danced like a ghost in the dark. I wasn't scared. Not of the past, not of being alone, not of what I'd left behind. I had chosen myself. Not because I was bitter, but because I was finally whole. Tomorrow, I'd walk down to the village market with Mark. Maybe buy a painting from the old man with sun-leathered skin who painted sea turtles on driftwood. Maybe we'd rent a boat and explore one of the uninhabited islets nearby. But tonight, I rested. Not because I was tired, but because for once the battle was over and no one could rewrite the ending. Outside, the tide came in. And somewhere across thousands of miles and broken promises, they opened that email. They saw the attachments. They read the truth. But what they felt, that was no longer my concern.